Here.
Mr. Volnick. Councilman Linger.
Here.
Vice Chairman Soros.
Here.
Chairman Simpson.
Here. Thank you. Do I have a motion this evening?
And a motion to excuse our absent member.
Motion by Councilman Hellinger,
Second.
second by Mr. Badger. Could the clerk please read the roll?
Mr. Badger.
Yes.
Mr. Halter.
Yes.
Mr. Prahl.
Yes.
Councilman Hellinger.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Soros.
Yes.
Chairman Simpson.
Yes. Moving on to item number 2, the approval of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on August 2nd, 2017, as reported and transcribed. What is the wish of the commission this evening?
Make a motion to approve the motionary summary of the Planning Commission held on August 2nd, 2017, as recorded and transcribed.
Motion by Mr. Second by Councilman Hellinger. Oh, all right, moving on to item number 3, regular business. Could the clerk please read item A into the record?
Oh,
we didn't.
roll on that?
Mr.
All right, let's-
Badger.
Yes.
Mr. Halter.
I guess so.
Mr. Prahl.
Abstain.
Mr. Volnick. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Hellinger.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Soros.
Yes.
Chairman Simpson.
Yes. Now on to item number 3, regular business. Could the clerk please read item A into the record?
A 2017-2210, a request by FedFund Dublin LLC for approval of a development plan exemption for an outdoor storage area on Lot 5 of the Innovation Business Park on 6.024 acres, zoned M1 PMU, Light Manufacturing District with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on Innovation Court.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the subject site is located on the, just north of the western terminus of Sawmill Parkway. It's accessed from Innovation Court, which cul-de-sacs to the north. Give you some history on this. Back in 2014, lots 1 through 6 on here were approved for rezoning, conditional use permit, preliminary subdivision, and plan. EMS was constructed just west of Innovation Park that year. Then in 2016, Lot 6, Cemetery 2 building was approved by Planning Commission, City Council, and constructed last year. The westernmost tenet of Cemetery 2 building, which is located just south of Lot 5 in this area, is requesting an outdoor storage area for their business. This would be a lay-down area for material, piping, and the like. The owner of the Cemetery 2 building and the owner of Lot 5, the Innovation Business Park, have an agreement to lease the outdoor storage area to the tenant that will house the lot to the tenant of the Cemetery 2 building, and the owner of the Innovation Lot, owner of Innovation Lot 5 have an agreement for a lease agreement to lease the outdoor storage area to the tenant area. It will be for a 5-year period. That's the background on this case. From a zoning perspective, the development text allows the outdoor storage. However, staff believes that because it's temporary in nature, that it needs a development planning exemption for approval of this by the commission. The engineering department's reviewing the engineering drawings as we speak. The access site would be through the outdoor storage area, would be from the rear of the access drive of the Innovation Park, or of the Cemetery 2 building. And from there, there'd be a gravel drive into this about 1.6 acre laydown area. That would be, it'd be all gravel, and it'd be surrounded by a black vinyl fence. A second access point in the future would be constructed from the cul-de-sac on Innovation Court that would extend through a private easement west to this site. And at that point, there would be an access gate to get into this laydown area. As I indicated, the laydown area would be about 1.6 acres. It'll be enclosed by a 6-foot-high fence with the access from behind Cemetery 2 building. The whole laydown area would be comprised of compacted gravel with a designated aisles for fire department access, and this should be a dustless surface. The engineering department does reserve the right to require other bindings on this gravel if dust becomes an issue in the future. A drainage swell is located on the west portion of the site and along the northern portion of the site. Again, a subject area, outdoor storage area, would be temporary, not to exceed 5 years. Landscaping and screening, there'd be no landscaping, but as I indicated, there'd be a black vinyl fence surrounding the site, and also per typical commercial fence requirements. There'd be no trees removed, there'd be no additional signage, and there'd be no lighting in this area. Therefore, staff recommends approval with 9 conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, just say thank you to staff and the applicants. I think we started discussing this maybe 2.5 weeks ago or so, which is slightly inside our normal deadlines, but per our normal course of events in the industrial area and the jobs producing area, we try to advance these projects as much as we can. This is obviously a fairly minimal project, not really unlike the Midway Pipe project that came before you several months ago, except on a much smaller scale and obviously temporary in nature. But appreciate you bringing another company and jobs to the community and working with us as staff. And staff, thank you for doing this one quickly. So we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff this evening? No?
Didn't we look at this one time before? It's awful familiar. I don't know.
Well, Midway Pipe is pretty close in use, and they had a large laydown area off of Pittsburgh Drive. That was just several months ago. That's brand new construction. This would be a tenant in Cemetery 2 with a kind of a similar laydown area, although much smaller at a little over 1.5 acres here. So it should feel a little familiar in terms of the specifics.
Okay. And that one we approved the gravel, right?
Yeah, that one they used asphalt millings. This one has a condition of qualifying dustless gravel, which we use behind Precision, also off Pittsburgh Drive, but it has an additional requirement of potential binder to that gravel surface is a little closer to the runway. And as the engineering department finishes their review of the plans, obviously, again, we're 2.5 weeks in here, they may require additional things for drive aisles in the back laydown area and that sort of thing, or the binder. They could require a binder to the gravel, keep it dustless.
Okay. Would the applicant like to come forward? If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hey, good evening. I'm John Lewis. I live at 1036 Hills Miller Road, Delaware. So I'd like to thank you all for coming together. I understand we're the only ones on the agenda tonight, so thank you for taking time for us. Any questions that we can answer for you?
No concerns with any of the conditions on the application?
No.
No? Okay.
Amy, being a builder, is closer to that than.
Okay.
So you've already secured a tenant, or is this conditioned upon securing the tenant?
They haven't actually signed with us yet, but these are some of the things that you have to get done in order to get them to do that, because they don't want to obligate themselves, not knowing for sure that it can happen.
Right.
It's a risk and a monetary investment that we make, one of many, in the hopes that we can get somebody in there that will bring both income for us and jobs for Delaware.
Okay. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I will ask, is there any member of the public here tonight who would like to speak on this case? All right. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission. What is the wish of the commission this evening?
Well, I'll make a motion to approve item 2017-2210 with the 9 conditions set by staff.
Motion by Mr. Badger,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Mansoros. Could the clerk please read the roll?
Mr. Badger,
Yes.
Mr. Halter,
Yes.
Mr. Prahl,
Yes.
Councilman Hillinger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Soros,
Yes.
Chairman Simpson.
Yes. Thank you very much. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
When will the first reading for this be for council?
You're actually, with the development plan exemption, we declare it exempt and you're kind of ratifying it, which is what you just did.
Okay,
So
great.
This is the end of the process
Okay, great.
for stuff to do staff level process.
Right.
obviously.
All right, moving on to item number 4 this evening, the planning director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate everybody being here. Well, with the exception of Andy tonight, everybody being here. A couple of things, and I'll turn it over to City Manager Tom Homan, who's here to brief you on many subjects, the capital improvement program being the highlight of the evening. But wanted to introduce to you, and I did it before the meeting, but formally, Jordan Selmick. He's our new addition to the team, a zoning officer. Comes to us most recently from the city of Upper Arlington for a couple of years and school before that. So we're happy to have him on board, and we're throwing everything we can think of at him. See how he does. Throw him in the deep end of the pool, watch him swim. He's doing a good job. So happy to have him on board and looking forward to good things. So, by the way, just when I don't wear a coat, don't wear a coat because you look better. Really good. Really good.
Thanks, Dave.
Appreciate that.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We're also obviously down Elaine this evening. She's recovering from some surgery. And so we have Kim Gepper here, who is Tom's assistant, and she's helping us out and helping many boards and commissions out with some of Elaine's clerk roles till we get Elaine back. So lucky her. And she's doing a great job, and we appreciate your help as well. So with that, we'll turn it over to Tom. Bill, obviously city engineer, you all know city engineer Bill Farina is here as well, because there'll be a little bit of discussion about roadways and how to pay for them, I think, this evening.
I'm glad that we're able to take advantage of an evening when there's not a lot on the agenda, because I've been on the other side there, knowing full well you can, a lot sometimes is before you, and when you get to matters like this, you don't get a lot of time to spend on them. So thank you for having us this evening. With me is Director of Public Works, City Engineer Bill Farina. You all know Tom Homan, City Manager, and I want to thank you for your service on this commission. It goes without saying that the volunteer boards and commissions in a city like Delaware, any city, are very, very critical to what happens here. And so thanks for what you do. What I wanted to do tonight was spend a little bit of time talking about the capital improvement program. And there is a section in the charter that talks about the capital improvement program is a 5-year plan that takes a look at what the capital needs are for the community. And it's required to be submitted to City Council annually by August 15th. It's required to be adopted by October 15th, and then it's incorporated into the operating budget, which is for 2018. So what you have in your packet, if you've had a chance even to glance at it, you'll see that the planning horizon is 2018 to 2022. And obviously every year we move a year forward. At the end of the process, after City Council adopts the plan, the recommendations for 2018 become an appropriation in the operating budget that the city council adopts in December. So you have the plan, and then you have the appropriation piece. So you'll note that when you look at the plan, after you've read the message, there's a general fund summary. And that general fund summary in this plan shows us to be in balance in 2018, but you'll see a series of red numbers in the out years. And that really underscores the challenge that we face as a community when we take a look at trying to forecast what our capital needs are and trying to square that with our resources. And so that's just an ongoing challenge. Bill has been here longer than I have, and I think that's probably been, it's not atypical. And so, you know, we could spend some time talking about our efforts to secure funding. We tried that last year as part of our levy. Unfortunately, we're not successful, and are talking now about how we look at that going forward, because the needs of the community, whether it's our repaving program, whether it's improving network streets, whether it's intersection improvements, you name an area of town, and there are a few areas where there isn't some sort of transportation need. So but the capital plan is not just about transportation. It's about a whole host of other infrastructure assets that we have to continue to invest in. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that tonight. And I want to give Bill an opportunity to talk specifically about kind of the transportation needs. And unique to the plan this year is I included, as part of my message, as an appendix, a memo that Bill had prepared, just taking a look at what the transportation needs are, and how we approach those. So we'll be talking about that as well. The plan starts really with the airport, and Dave's got an exhibit up here I think he can show that is kind of an overview of we call it the Sawmill Parkway area, which really includes our current industrial that was established about 52 years ago. For those of you familiar with PPG, they celebrated in 2005 their 50th anniversary. PPG was one of the first businesses located in that park, and today that park is almost 100% full, and that has helped the city tremendously. But we put this image up here because it includes not only the industrial park, and you've seen these images, of course. It includes kind of our western boundary, which is the quarry area. So obviously there's not a lot of growth forecasted west of Section Line Road. At least the quarry will tell you they're going to be there. They have plans, so that's a kind of a natural boundary line. But the airport area that's up there, obviously immediately kind of south of the industrial park, is an important asset for the community, and one that probably we want to capitalize on even more. I think it has, Bill can speak to some of the projects we've done out there in the past couple of years. We have been very, very fortunate as a general aviation airport to receive FAA funding, without which we would not be able to do a lot of things we do. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, provides the general aviation airport grants and other direct federal assistance for projects. And I'll let Bill just kind of provide an overview of what we've done out there in the past couple of years and some of the things we're looking at that are relevant to the CIP.
Dave, if you could flip to that, give that one image.
I didn't have that one, but you can see the dark
Well, that's fine.
pavement on here.
If you've seen the airport in the past year, you saw the new
That's good.
800-foot extension, and you can see it right there to the right side of the picture. That's 800 feet, which brought our airport length up to 5,800 feet. Doesn't seem that significant, but it's very significant to what our master plan is attracting more jet traffic. It doesn't attract additional jet flights, but what it does allow it to do is for two things. One, inclement weather Jets have lower ceilings so they can use our airport in poor weather conditions. It also allows a full fuel load on the larger jets that fly into the airport. And so now jets can come in from parts of the country, East Mississippi, stop by Delaware, get a full load of fuel, and then be able to fly all the way to California. That's highly significant because that changes the dynamics of Delaware's airport attracting or becoming a point on the map to fuel as opposed to a Port Columbus or going up to Dayton. So that was significant. That project also included the refurbishment of the entire runway as well. If you recall, that runway was reconstructed, the whole airport runway was reconstructed in about 99. We completed that project. And then we went ahead and finished the 800-foot addition last year. And this year, just north of the runway, you can see that smaller strip, that's the taxiway A, runs the entire length of the airport. From the western port, about where the terminal is west, is the only piece of pavement that's not been resurfaced. And this year, we'll have one last $500,000 project that will resurface that last about 2,400 linear feet. As Tom mentioned, why these are possible, the runway project itself, the 800 feet, was just under $5 million total effort. Very expensive airport work. But we are very fortunate to receive 9% FAA funds plus an additional 5% matching state funds through ODOT Aviation. So our obligation on these projects is very minor relative to the significance of the project. That's why we've been able to keep our pavement in such good shape. In fact, our pavement is in such good new shape. It's one of the more premier small general aviation airports now in not only central Ohio, but in kind of the mid-Ohio region. So that helps us, again, just making an attractive airport. The big picture of the airport is there's not a lot in our CIP regarding airport projects because most of it is pavement. We will be working through a process of business planning, trying to take what's that next step to attract the right businesses, larger businesses, or maybe hangar projects, things like that, to really begin to work that business element of the airport now that we have all the infrastructure in place.
So that's it's an important overview to have. We have an airport commission. John Lewis actually is on the airport commission, but it's another volunteer commission appointed by council, charged with really making recommendations to the city on ways to expand the airport. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to get more corporate aircraft based at the airport. We have hangars right now that we lease for general aviation purposes, recreational pilots. We also have some corporate hangars. You've probably seen Jetstream Place. It's a hangar that was built by John Schottmer over 10 years ago. We'd like to duplicate that in that one particular area on the off the runway there, just because that helps us from an economic development standpoint. It helps with fuel sales, and it just provides another opportunity for businesses in this region. So that's something that we're continuing to work on. Any questions regarding the airport that you have, or just observations? Feel free just to ask. The next section is really probably the more critical infrastructure area facing us, and it's really our street, our transportation system. And it is an area where I think we do a decent job for what we have, but there are the needs of the community are just outpacing our resources. And even if we weren't growing, even if we weren't adding more residents to the community, let's just say we stopped growing, we would still have the demands of a community that was laid out in the 1800s. A lot of these road systems that we're dealing with are ones that need to be addressed. And so it's not always a question of growth. It's a question of just a community that's, it's an aging community, and it's got infrastructure that needs to be addressed. So I'm going to have Bill just provide just some thoughts about that in terms of how we're trying to just work with the limited resources we have. And I'd also just be interested in feedback from you as commission members and also as residents of the community about your observations about the transportation needs of the community, because you're facing it all the time. As commission members, you see it all the time, I'm sure. And so with that, I would
Sure, I think everybody here is pretty familiar with the issues we've been talking about in terms of infrastructure management, especially with the road, highway system and appurtenances there too. I'd really encourage you to read the 4-page document that I think was included in your package. It's really, I try to provide a summary every year to the city manager and council, kind of the state of our highway system and our needs for predominantly our operations and paving programs. So there's some good information in there. Fundamentally, from the charts in there, you can see our roads, you know the development, the amount of projects you approve. Our road network continues to grow. It outpaces our ability to maintain the road. And every time we have a new subdivision approved, there's 3 more miles or 4 more miles or 2 more miles of road that we have to put into our inventory and try to take care of as best we can. So along with that, we've been working with pavement ratings, pavement condition ratings for the past, since 1999, 2000. So we have about 15 really solid, good years of recorded data. And what we can say is that we've put most of our effort into our arterial roads, and our 36, 37 Sandusky Street, because those are our most important streets. 85% of all trips every day are on your arterial streets. Very few relative to total trips are on your local streets. So we put most of our money into the collector streets and the arterial streets. We've been able to maintain that pavement in fairly good condition. To note, last year, past couple of years, we worked on Sandusky Street. That's an arterial, trying to keep that in good shape. But the local streets, even though, you know, we consider anything that's in the subdivisions, for the most part, a local street, cul-de-sacs, loop roads, a lot of the roads in and out. Those are the ones that have suffered in terms of lack of funding. Not that we haven't done any local streets. In some cases, we get development block grant funding. We're able to put in the low, moderate income areas and address those. But largely, our local network is largely unfunded. So our pavement condition continues to drop. There's a graph in there on the second page that shows when we started working on this, our pavement condition was up in the high 80s, and now we're below the 70s into the 60s. Back in, again, 99, 2000, there was an infrastructure task force. So, yeah, Jim, I think you're on that. We had put together, and out of that came just an overview looking at our infrastructure, some recommendations to the city about what our priorities, and part of that was pavement condition ratings and what we had to keep the pavement at. And again, our target streets, our arterial collectors, we've been managing that for the most part, but our local streets, we haven't hit we've missed the grade on that. And largely it's just funding limitations. As Tom mentioned in the beginning, a lot of our street programs are general fund revenues, and you already see that in the out years, how quickly a negative balance comes into play. So there's just not significant money available. I believe what we're proposing in this CIP is about $150,000 per year of network local road funding. That'll buy me about a half mile of funding. Out of about 50% of our roads are local. That's about 75 miles, 76 miles of our streets are local, and we'll have funding to take care of about a half mile of them. So it's very significant, the situation we're in. How does that relate to the work of this body? I want to give you an example. Recently, we've worked on the, I think it's Glen Ross, south of Cheshire Road. That subdivision there, all we got right now is the roundabout about completed, the entranceway to it. But it contains about 5.1 miles of new pavement to take care of. That will cost, on an annualized basis, the city about $75,000 a year. Additionally, we need to have just to take care of the streets in that subdivision, not including lights and pavement markings, plowing efforts, the manpower and equipment to take care of it. That's how significant the growth of the city is in our ability to operate and take care of streets. So yes, we understand that, we recognize when the calls come in, we're not ignoring the condition of our streets in a lot of cases. It's just we don't have the funds there. So how that kind of wraps into some of the decisions and the conditions that David presents is sometimes you hear engineering division wants road widths a certain way or wants restrictions. Those are really significant when we make those comments, because what we're trying to do is limit the impacts to operations, limit the impacts to the network when we make those comments. And that's why when these, and Carrie and Jonathan bring plans before me, I look at them to try to limit the impacts overall to the city's operation. And that's where some of the comments come from. So you can see the connection to some of the comments that come to the reports that come through the engineering division. They relate right back to the budget because we really have to reduce the impact of operations. This isn't a call to say we should reduce by any means good projects that come to us. We need to take seriously the comments that come about when we're asking for certain things to be approved a certain way or to be changed. It's usually because we're trying to control the ultimate costs back to the city. So that kind of shows you in a sense how operations is impacted by some of the work in planning. The other image that David put up here on the screen, this is our 2016, I want to call our updated transportation plan. The dots are intersection improvements, mostly existing intersections that need some form of improvement. And the lines, dashed lines are the dashed lines are new roadways. The solid lines are upgrades to existing roadways. And obviously on the east side, you can see where the point intersection is. Both those roads we know, especially Central Avenue, needs reconstruction. It's a solid line out here. The large line around the east side of the town, that's would be a bypass at some point. It's on there. In terms of feasibility financially, it's not. It's a $212 million project. I've got $100,000 to try to repave some local streets. But it's important to keep all these lines on the plan because as we expand out and work across boundaries outside our corporate limit to the jurisdictions around us, we want to make sure good planning is maintained in the city. The basis of this document goes back again to work in 1999, 2000. We had our large comprehensive thoroughfare plan update that we did with the county and came up with a good set of major arterial improvements that we all agreed on. Sawmill Parkway recently completed, one of the highlights of that, and we're glad we opened that. There's other projects that we have completed on that plan. But these projects here add up to hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, any individual project is an important project, but the ability to fund a lot of these things, most of them are not on the federal highway system, so we have to locally fund these projects. Again, typically it would be general fund revenues, and the money just isn't there right now. So in the past, through planning conditions, we've had developers participate in a significant amount of the improvements this city's seen over the past 25 years. We still, the roundabout on Cheshire Road is a very good example of the developer contributing to the impacts to the local road network. We're not putting our funding into it, that's developer funding going into it. That's a very important position for the city to maintain. As much as it's more difficult from development community these days to afford these things, it's almost impossible for the city at this point to afford these. So it's really important to have these significant discussions and development conditions when we consider these. And I think.
And Bill, I just jump in on there in terms of some of the larger projects, the sort of the loop road you see around the city. If you went back several generations to this plan, you would see several roads that are now, in the community, largely because of development and putting in the initial road. Yes, we have probably the long-term maintenance of that. This version of the plan, it's important to keep those in, not just because it's good planning and planning with our jurisdictional neighbors, but it also impacts, as you see cases come, and we make pretty strong recommendations about Winterbourne Road and the roundabout down by Cheshire, to stick with that example. Those costs have to be borne by the developer. The road has to be put in by the developer. It's important to have a plan, a policy guiding document. We have our comp plan. The comp plan also has a thoroughfare plan. We're updating the thoroughfare plan now. We'll update the comprehensive plan, as you know. But it's important to have those policy level documents when we're talking as staff with developers. And ultimately, when they bring a case forward, it makes for the most defensible position to maintain those policies moving forward, because there's a handful of communities around the country and really around Ohio that can afford to just build all of this stuff. We're not one of those, and that doesn't put us in a great minority. It's just sort of the way that the work gets done.
That's just a really excellent point too. Our original thoroughfare plan contained, I think, 14 or 15 future roads. We were challenged by a development that actually didn't go forward on the east side, where we said we want an improvement, a road, they came back and said, well, we'll have a transportation plan that shows that, so you can't require that as a community. So in 2004, we quickly got together what we called a transportation plan update, and we started adding all these, what we consider smaller projects onto it. Examples would be parts of Hauk Road, which now is a complete road from Merrick all the way down to Pittsburgh Drive. That wasn't on the plan. Merrick itself, Vern Avenue connection, projects like that you all see as a board and just take for granted that, hey, we're going to make them do these things. Very important to have this important plan as part of the planning process. So when recommendations do come before the board, we know that if there are things that we think are reasonably fair to put onto the developer for addition to the project, that they do happen. So it's always something that we can modify and we can make adjustments to. It's a living document, but it's a good baseline in order to make sure we're protecting the city for future improvements.
And again, kind of tie it together. Remember, we have a parking plan, second generation for downtown, kind of does the same thing, although arguably probably more of those projects are with us. We have the second generation really of an adopted bikeway plan. You guys see reference to that in many of your cases. Same kind of thing in those subject matter areas. Parks and Rec is another one that we utilize, and Ted Miller is doing a good job in updating those planning documents as well. But they all have to, the ideal is, and the idea is that those all fit together under the umbrella ultimately of our comprehensive plan.
If we need this plan, why hasn't it been done?
Which plan?
The road plan.
We have.
Well, yeah, this is our accepted document right now that we go by.
Well, you were saying that you get someone in and they say we don't have a document.
We ran into
In
a
the past.
developer in the past, Jim. We did an east side development. You may recall that on the east side of the city, over where the Coles and the Myers is, across the street from that, where we had a developer. We were talking about you need to do these improvements because it's in the plan, and I think at the time we didn't.
It was our good planning to add some road improvements, which essentially now Parkway extending north in that area. We didn't have anything on the plan that actually showed that.
This is the second or third version of
Yes.
coming out of that.
So in 2004, Jim, that's when we created this document and been using that document since then as the basis for our request, because we do have an adopted plan that includes these smaller projects as well.
I guess my other concern about this is the paper deal. I mean, I've been on that thing for more years than I care to remember. And 1999, we showed the program needed to be done. No tax levy was even brought up, we put on until a year ago, almost 17 years later. Okay. And I don't know why, I mean, there isn't any other choice but a tax levy. And I don't think there's one this year, is there, Tom?
No, not city.
We did one. I don't understand. I know it's an election year, and that's fine and dandy, but we did it with the city hall and the justice facility. I think we went back about every other year for at least 3 or 4 years until we finally got one passed. I mean, there is just no choice here. I mean, city council is going to have to just say, I know people complain about the streets, but this is what it's going to take to fix them. If the city doesn't go back for a levy every time there's an election, if that means over the next 5 or 6 years, eventually the citizens of Delaware are going to see that this is really needed. Back then it was $1 million a year. I would guess to say it's closer to $2 million now.
Just upward.
And I was looking at the streets that failed in here. It's amazing. I think. I really think
we don't see a lot of those because they're local streets. We see the streets that we do a pretty reasonable job of repairing. Sandusky, London, Liberty, the major arterials, but we don't see a lot of the local streets that in this report you see, but you don't drive those streets that often. We drive
I think city council is just going to have to go with another levy. I don't see any choice. Unless someone, from what I hear you say all the time, and even some of the council people, it's just in their money. So why don't they go with another levy?
Schools are on, and schools are on here. I mean, some of that's just deciding what the timing is going to be, assessing what happened and why.
People don't want to pay more taxes, what's happened.
Well,
That's pretty simple, but I don't think I think they're gonna have to realize how bad these roads are. And the only way you can do that is just keep going back after them. You know, school levies have to do it at times.
Right.
I think the city has to too. I don't. So unless you can find another way of funding it, it's great to come up with these things, but there's just no funding mechanism. I think the city council's responsibility to put one out there.
Well, I think one of the things that at least the feedback that I've heard, biggest thing with the levy going down was it was permanent. And when we had our retreat, we're discussing that, we initially came in and found a 10 or 15 year
it wasn't going to be
terms.
permanent.
It wasn't going to be permanent. And then the point was made, well, but, these needs are never going to go away. So I kind of changed council's thinking and we made that decision to put it on the ballot as a permanent levy. That's been the biggest thing that I've heard from people coming back saying, basically, we don't trust you. We're not giving you a blank check. That kind of what they're really coming up. It's give us 10 years, give us 5 years, and then there's that whole idea of, do we make it just a maintenance one on any new construction, and it will just be to, work on our existing inventory, which is really short-sighted. But again, that's one of those options that is being bandied about.
But when we're doing nothing.
Right.
You understand?
Oh, I know.
I know you do.
Yeah.
And I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying is,
Yeah.
we're doing nothing. And so nothing's happening, and nothing's going to happen. Whether it's the schools do renewables all the time, don't they?
Yeah.
They live on renewables.
Yep.
So if you did a 10-year, let's say, and they saw the work was getting done, then when you go to renew it, they're gonna feel a lot better about renewing it and maybe make it a permanent levy.
Not to hammer off on levy type of things, but anytime you're going to go to a voter and say, hey, we've got to, increase your income tax type of thing, not only are you going to have to prove to them the need for this, but they're going to want something else back. If you talk to people down in my area, generally you're going to hear that, hey, if you're going to take it up to 2.0 on our income tax type of thing, they're going to want a bigger credit. The vast majority don't work in the city of Delaware. They work outside the city of Delaware. So they're going to want some type of credit on their taxes versus just a 50% type credit. They're going to say, gee, we go down to Lewis Center. If we lived and worked in there, it's 100% credit back to Dublin type of thing. So you can come up with levies, permanent versus not permanent, but people are still going to say, if you're going to hit my income tax type of thing, I'm going to want a bigger credit share.
And the other thing peculiar to the Southeast is that we put in place funding mechanisms to help fund the infrastructure. Glen Parkway is funded with an assessment charge.
We have a large community authority on the Glen Parkway. That's borne on the residents in that area.
And that
so
was,
now you've got three things to convince, let's say the Southeast area on what a levy can do for them. And that's going to be a very, very tough sell.
And so that's one of those pieces, Jim, I think, I understand your point and appreciate it. And I think that what the point Dean makes is one that we've heard as well. And we recognize that when we looked at those annexations to the south, is that would, it's in a different district, different school district. So but there's still, and as Dean points out, there's a lot of people who work outside the city. They don't really come north, so they don't see the same kinds of problems. They don't think go through the Plains much or any of that. But it doesn't. They're still part of the city, and we still have to convince them that it makes sense and it's a good investment. Because if you're a resident, whether it's the south end or the north end or wherever, you have to look at the kind of the greater good. But I hear your point. I mean, you sat on those committees back in the late 90s that came up with a lot of these recommendations. So,
not all is necessarily bad with a high growth area with roads. One of the benefits I want to make sure we understand too is growth, high growth does, and being on a state route system which hurts us because we got obligations to state routes, but it helps us because we can attract some funding. Some of our largest projects, like 2342, the recently completed 315 Stratford, 23 project, Pennsylvania project, those projects, we worked very hard and over several years to get funded through state, federal resources. And those projects together are almost entirely funded outside local funds. So we had some obligation. Most of our obligation typically is through administration on those projects, working through the design, through the right-of-way acquisitions, and turning those over to the state to construct. So that does help us being on the crossroads of these. We get traffic with it, but we do get some funds. Two projects really highlight that are in here is the East William Street project is still, we're anticipating construction in 2019, and that's largely funded through an earmark that we were one of Tom's first projects when he was here, was getting earmark, congressional earmark. Those funds originally were for what is the first link of the bypass project, but again, that quickly became a $75 million initiative. State realized we don't have the funds for that. We were able to transfer that to the East William Street, which will help resolve that, and make some improvements on there, really from Lake Street out towards in front of ODOT. Along with that is the larger, more recent thing that we all are familiar with now, the Point project, and we have about $18 million now in total funding for a project that's going to be $25 million project. Very significant funding that early in the project. I'm convinced we'll be able to get additional non-local funding sources to help fill that gap on that project. But that's kind of the marquee project on the east side. Fix that intersection so people can get out of Delaware. When we did complete what we call the Phase A improvements, that was back in 2009. We were very clear about it, but this had a lifespan based on background traffic. The actual recession helped us a little bit because we had less housing starts and less traffic. But over the past 4 or 5 years, everything upticked right back up again. Traffic is there, and if you're there in the morning or the afternoon, you can see it's very difficult to get out of Delaware. The project was really designed at the time because it was almost impossible to get into Delaware. And if you remember, those traffic queues were at a standstill back as far as the Kroger distribution center. Now that project, although the traffic's heavy, continues to flow slowly, but getting out of town very difficult. The project that we are getting ready to go into design, well, it's pretty simple. We're going to take that small bridge and make it a lot larger bridge and more lanes under it, and just pull the cork out of that in a sense and let traffic flow freer. There's other projects, including Central Avenue, pavement condition, capacity limitations, Lake Street and Central. Those are all projects we also recognize. We do have an opportunity for a funding application next year again with MORTC to try to get additional funds. And one of the projects that we're potentially putting out there is this other piece of the east side, Central Avenue, Lake Street project to help that. So we are able to attract those kind of dollars because we are a dynamic and growing city on these state routes. So there is a lining to all this growth and how we're positioned on these crossroads. So that does help us out. And some of the projects you see, really the streets, the next section is a grants project, and I think there's one sheet in the budget just on the point, really summarizes those. And that's where a lot of our federal dollars go into those projects that we're able to attract. There is local obligations on those, typically about 20%. And so a $10 million project could have $2.5 million of our funds into it. And again, that makes it very difficult as we plan out years in the CIP process to say, how are we going to pay for that $2.5 million? But if we're in the position on some of these east side improvements, like the Point, like we just can't keep saying no to that project, especially now we have $18 million in our hand. We need to, and council and city manager and my office had to sit and think long and hard. If we accept this money, we're going to resolve this project, but it may mean there's things in the next 5 years we can't do because of it. But we probably can't sit and not take care of this effort.
That's a good point. I think we talked about this with city council at the time that we were looking at the funding options for the Point, and we knew that our obligation was going to be pretty significant. But this project, because of its importance to the community, we're now reflecting in the CIP an annual contribution of about $350,000 that would come from the city. So that's $350,000 that could otherwise be used for these other projects. So that's one of the reasons, A, we're trying to increase the amount of other funding we're getting. We've approached the county about helping us in that project because we think it's significant enough from a county, a regional perspective, that there should be some funding participation. And we've put a jet in place with the outlet mall. So if you work at the outlet mall, you're paying the city's income tax, and those funds are dedicated just for the corridor improvement of the new community authority. We're getting millage charges from the new outlet mall because we realize that if that mall it goes in, it's going to have impact. So we're trying to use as many other sources as we can. If you still come back to there's a limited amount of local sources, and unless we increase that, we're gonna be challenged. So that's the other point regarding the Point project is that I know the community gets frustrated with this, and this was one of the messaging challenges during the levy was the Point Railroad Bridge is not our bridge, and it's not the responsibilities of the railroad to widen the bridge, to widen what's under their railroad. You know, those railroad cars are using that railroad with no issues. They're not having the backups that we're having, and they're somewhat indifferent to the fact that we've got these long traffic queues. And despite the look of that bridge, they're in the driver's seat at this point by saying it's not slated to be repaired for the next 20 or 25 years. It was built for steam locomotives. Steam locomotives weighed a lot more than what you have on there today, and it will last longer than we probably have the patience for. So that's one of the reasons we went after the federal and the state funding for a project like that. So that's probably the largest. As again, that became a messaging challenge during the levy. Why doesn't the railroad pay for it? Well, the railroad, we've asked them to pay for it, and they've got thousands of bridges on their system, and they don't have to. So the other issue that came up before is this bypass. And Jim remembers the whole idea of a bypass around the city. And Bill shows that on this map for good reason, because someday it probably makes sense, but those are hundreds of millions of dollars. And I don't know how many of you were in town and lived in the city during the I-73 debate, when I-73 was going to be an extension from Toledo, from Detroit, all the way down to Florida?
Oh, not Florida.
Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle Beach. It was going to come through Delaware. And the state said, we've got these plans, and eventually the landowners and others just opposed it to the point where project just went away because it was so controversial. And that was before Facebook and Twitter and everything else. So those are challenges, but it still makes sense to show something, because if we're in the position as a state to look at that, it would help us in terms of our transportation system. So it's for any questions about streets, transportation that you may have, or observations. I'd just be curious what some other thoughts might be about the challenges we face.
Have you, I mean, are you considering alternate methods of maintaining like the local streets? Maybe you already do, I haven't seen it, but just patch and chip seal to keep it going. And if you got 150,000 for local streets, you can do a lot more miles or feet, if you will, by doing those lower types of.
That's a good, I mean, it's a really fair question. And the answer is yes, we have, and we respond to that when we don't believe the local community will respond well to chip and seal.
Oh, I know they will.
Pavements in a developed area. So we do use some sealants, slurry seals, and things like that. But the county is able to get away with chip seal treatments, cape seals, things like that. It's different within the community. There's a higher level of service.
Point is, though, if that's the only thing you can do, and even if people are going to be upset about it, at least you'd be doing something to try to maintain the road, and that might put a thought in their head that maybe we really do need some more funds. That's
a good point. Any more on streets, transportation system? It's a pretty if we-
What type of time frame are you looking at on the Glen Parkway? Do we have other communities?
Yeah, actually, could we put up that southeast map, Dave? Yeah, so Glen Parkway is planned all the way to 36, 37 and beyond that eventually. And the piece that we're working on in design right now would take Glen Parkway from the existing route, north of the roundabout where the road just ends, up to Berlin Station Road. That's what's in design right now. And we're working with the county on different alignments. We're working with the railroad because we've got a railroad conflict up there. But our plan is to hopefully open that in 2019. I think originally it would look like it was going to be 18 to coincide with the opening of the new high school. But
This is where the high school is.
yeah. Now, the high school is going to benefit from Pyatt Road. My understanding is the county is extending Pyatt
Yes, they are.
so that will provide some relief there. But our Glen Parkway project will probably be a 19 project just because of acquisition of property and the challenges of
The difficulty with
The
the
railroad.
design is, Glen is obviously an arterial to go all the way up to 36 and beyond, over 23 maybe someday. We want to make sure that what we get in place can be extended relatively easy, whether that's over that railroad or under that railroad. Well, that in itself poses just some design complexities into what can we build that can be expanded. What we don't want to do is build and then have to rebuild 1,000 feet of road and throw that away. So we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to get a connection to Berlin Station Road that can also serve as a permanent piece of the larger project. And because of the proximity, the railroad is so close to Berlin Station, and we have those two real tight radius, goofy, they're below design parameters right now to try to take into consideration, compounded by all that is outside the city's jurisdiction. So we have other folks with input into it. It's a lot harder than it looks like on the surface. So, but we are working through a number of alternatives, and we're working with the railroad again, Norfolk Southern Railroad, and we need their permission again on whatever we throw out there. We need to sense their blessing as to what our ultimate plans are. As Tom mentioned, we would be hopeful that we can settle with the railroad in terms of what alignment will work, and we can then go ahead and feel fairly comfortable getting the design for that next phase in place, because it will benefit the circulation through there and provide alternate access over to the high school, as well as begin to open up quality access to that area north of Berlin Station that's already sewered by a prior project, but doesn't have any significant highway access into it at this point.
Well, I do think just getting it up to Berlin Station, we have, again, we're talking about the railroad tracks and how to get over or under them, which is ultimately important. But I know it is I've heard this from a lot of people, and Dean can chime in, but you can literally stand at the end of Glen Parkway and kind of see Berlin Station Road.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you can take Braumiller, which turns into Berlin, which turns into Braumiller, and kind of take the back road. But as you know, we have now, after 15 and getting close to 20 years for a couple of these, we have Stockdale Farms and Terra Alta getting off the ground finally. And one of the things we talked about long-term with those is to be able to direct, most of the traffic, keep Pollock as a scenic road and direct most of the traffic back out and down to 23, and that was really related to Glen Road. So getting it up to Berlin Station is not just the high school, but it completes that. It's almost a missing link in that transportation corridor right now, which is, going to have some development dependence as well.
the other point to make regarding this project is it's not funded through the general fund. It's funded through a residential tax increment financing that we put in place back when we were looking at this Parkway project with a private developer. So we're not using general levy funds for that. It's not even, we're not even using new community authority funds with it. It's tax increment financing that is building up, and it was originally intended to build the bridge over the railroad, but we realized that wasn't going to be possible unless we had something connection to the north. So that's one of the benefits. If you have the growth, you try to harness it in such a way as you can get these revenues, dedicated revenues, and so this is an example of that. But it will, I think it'll be, it'll be a good project. The next question will be when you get it to Curve Road and when do you get it from Curve up to 36, 37, and then you really do have kind of a southeast bypass of sorts from 23 all the way up to 36, 37, and that will probably be more growth related. The other one I want to show, just it's a road project, the JEGS. This other alignment has long been contemplated. Now that Sawmill Parkway is built, the city is doing a lot of planning in terms of how to open up this area for more economic development opportunities. You had John Lewis before you tonight. He's an example of an entrepreneur, businessman who's worked with Fed One, secured some property on the northern part of Sawmill Parkway and is doing some really cool things up there with his Symmetry 2 building. We want to do is we want to open up.
So Tom, just real quick, so this is US 42. We're pointing north, and here it goes over the bridge, and this is Sawmill Road. This is JEGS current development with their driveway that ends in their parking lot. So JEGS Boulevard, you can see, is sort of the yellow line. I know it's a big scale. It's a big area we're talking about, but the yellow line on the map then would be JEGS Boulevard.
So when JEGS was approved by the Planning Commission and City Council and the development agreement was entered into, JEGS agreed that they would dedicate road right-of-way for the future extension of JEGS Boulevard. And we've been working with them in terms of identifying an alignment that would eventually come all the way down to Sawmill Parkway. Whether it gets built in one piece, we don't know. This is a project, though, an example where we don't really have any dedicated funding for, but it's an important project to at least identify. So if there are funding opportunities out there, if we are successful someday with a levy and we're able to do road network expansion projects, this might be one of them. But this project itself opens up, Bill, there's probably close to 1,000 acres of land in that area. And now that Parkway project has been completed, and we spent probably 2 decades working with the county on that, that opens up that entire area for really more business development that we can all benefit from.
Well, these and even let's say you're doing it, talking about like this one or even an east-west type of thing on the north side of town, you'd be looking at tools, whether it's an authority or a JED with some developers and stuff like that, versus just a strict levy dollar that's going to fall into a general fund to get pulled out of, right? It would just be back to the bills area and let's say the maintenance and stuff like that, how to build those kind of costs in there.
Yeah, we need to figure that. That's one of the things we have to try to figure out, because in the proposed Moving Delaware Forward Transportation Levy program, that would have generated about $2 million in today's dollars. And we really set that up with 3 buckets. One bucket was maintenance. A second bucket was kind of expansion project, adding to the whether it was Valley Side Drive or Merrick Parkway and things like that, projects like this. And then the other bucket was leveraging federal funds. So that's one of the things. Are you suggesting, Dean, that the levy be more narrow in terms of, or that new dollars be more narrow?
I wouldn't bucket it that way. I mean, you're gonna have to market it some different way.
Yeah.
Type of thing, whether it's, strictly for a specific reason. You just mentioned you had a $17 million type of, federal type things. You're specifically going to say it's for the capital or for the, the point area type of thing. It might be the way you're going to have to market it to people to say, the only way we're going to get this through is by being very specific on what these dollars have to go to. It can't be into the, just into a maintenance or, people thinking it's going into a general revenue.
Right. That's really what.
And schools have to do it that way. You'll notice schools do it that way, but that's a state law. The schools have to do levies that type of way. So it's going specific here, but I mean, the cities don't have those kind of requirements.
Oh, that's helpful. I mean, that's kind of some of the feedback that we need to get in terms of what would make sense.
And timing is always going to be no matter what when the levy comes up. Right. But I mean figuring out that marketing end of it.
16 was a very unique election.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. A lot of levies did not make it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's JEGS Boulevard. That's kind of economic development related, but I wanted to show that up there. It's not There's no, as they say, there's no funding dollars associated with that, but that's one of those projects that if we have it designed and there are funding opportunities, we can go after the dollars for that. I wanted to wrap things up by just chatting quickly about, I want to mention parks. I want to make a plug for, and Dave and his staff have done a really good job of making sure that our developments have neighborhood parks. And some of even the larger parks down in the Cheshire Crossing area, Glen Ross recently opened a second pool with some other amenities. But there is a need, if you take a look at the projected growth in the southeast, to look at a larger, some sort of a community park. And that is something Ted Miller, our Parks and Natural Resources Director, is looking at. Do you do that north of Glen Parkway? Do you do it? Where do you do it? And what does it entail? It's a conversation, obviously, with a lot of the residents. It's a conversation with the school district because they're building a big school there. They've probably got some recreational assets that they might be able to collaborate with the city on. But as you take a look at the planning of that area, just that's one of the things that we'll be hearing more and more about. We have Smith Park on the west side of the city. We have Mingo Park. We have Veterans Park. All community parks, all well-utilized community parks. But what we really don't have right now is that in the southeast. But we have the makings of that. There's 2 pools down there. There's 2 outdoor pools down there right now, just through the work of the different developments that we've had.
You know,
I don't know how, what's your perspective?
You know,
on that,
my perspective on, and I'm a big park person, so it might come across as being negative, but over the recent years here, we've had so many requirements in the developers to add so much. They're no longer like little pocket park type of things. That how big of a need is there going to be in the southeast area all the way down? If you look at one of the larger developments, going to have over 1,000 homes in it, in the Glen Ross type of things, there's two pools. You know, there's going to be 2 basketball courts. There's a volleyball court. There's, you know, acres of land that's set aside just for, you know, whether you turn it into a soccer fields or something like that. The other communities that are in there, the crossings and stuff like that, those have those small those small pocket type parks type of things. But in some of these larger developments, those are not, I mean, those are huge parks almost sitting by themselves. They are actually HOA driven. Those aren't city, you know, that's not a city park.
Right.
Those pools are not city driven type of thing. You have to belong to the HOA. I am a big park person. I just wonder how, you know, that southeast area, how effective, like, let's say a huge Smith Park will be.
It may not, there may not be a role for, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
there
would
may
you
not
go-
be a role for that type of thing. You know, all that type of stuff.
And that's part of that planning
That's a
process.
really good point. I think that's something that we've got to keep in mind and think about as we move forward. Just, again, a sense of scale here. I think when you go north of Berlin to Curve Road, that's another 1,000+ acres in there.
Oh, I bet.
We don't know how that's going to develop.
Yeah.
It may kind of be the same way with the amenity package like you're seeing down there. But that's a really good point, I think, for us to keep in mind. It's just a little different than we've kind of developed in the past, and that we need to fill rather than a 30, 40, 50 acre community scale park is what I hear you saying.
That's what you're starting to
So
see.
you're not hearing that feedback from
No,
residents that we
no.
need this-
People are, you know, they're in our areas type of thing. They like what they're seeing being developed type of thing. That's what they're going to utilize, which is right in their neighborhood type of thing. But I would say just even generally through the county, what you're also seeing, if you go down to, let's say, the Evans Farm type of area, is it's similar to the Glen Ross, is that it's all centrally located. You know, it's not a driving destination anymore. If you're going more than, you know, half a mile on your bike to go to a park, people aren't doing it type of thing. It's got to be pretty well centralized type of thing. So yeah, those next 1,000 acres running north, who knows? But if your developers are already building something to pull that community together as a destination in and of itself, you start to lose that maybe a huge need for a Mingo or a Smith or something at that kind of scale.
Or maybe potentially share space with the school, the township, and city.
And we've met with Olentangy Youth Athletic Association because of their needs, and we realize that those partnerships are important. So,
Right.
I also think the park, and you're alluding to this, some of the park amenity packages are changing over just the small pocket park with a piece of play equipment in it.
Yeah.
That has a value, clearly has a value to it, but in the southeast area, I think we're going to see the first effort of preservation of parks. It's been largely county focused and not city focused. It'll still be in the county, but it'll be adjacent to Peralta, and obviously anybody can use it. More a passive park with walkways, just a different kind of amenity package that I think adds to that mix that you're talking about. It's a very interesting point.
And to piggyback on that, we're seeing the newer developments, which we haven't had too many new developments, but the ones that we're talking to, it seems like they're including those amenities in their design.
They're trying to, I think it's a selling point.
It's a selling point. That's their marketing for their.
It's true. It definitely isn't as much of a battle with the development community to talk about adding recreational opportunities within their developments. At a 50,000-foot level, it's not as much of a battle. I will tell you that there's plenty of development community that feel like, just 20% open space is too much, especially with rising infrastructure costs and those kinds of things.
Yeah,
sure. But you're seeing Evans Farm and even some of our other developments that are 30, 40 in the case of Evans Farm, depending how you want to calculate it, 50% open space.
Right.
It is more of those amenity packages and making sure that we're also linking those spaces through our pedestrian connections, which I think we're doing a much more conscientious
For sure on that.
job
Yeah,
of
they want
doing.
linkage, with the big pathways. No doubt about that one.
And I also think
Again, something else to have to maintain, which is in the CIP.
it's the type of development, getting a lot more senior facilities. They don't have the amenities that, the typical
Yeah,
family
they don't want them.
subdivisions would have.
Good point, too.
The other thing you mentioned about parks is done a pretty good job with the levee. The levee's coming up on its 10-year anniversary. Community center and the parks out there, but we were able to upgrade a number of our existing parks. So we kind of reinvested, which has been good. In addition to that, the bike path program, you adopted the bike path plan. We use our impact fee dollars to build a lot of those bike paths, and we use some grant funds for that as well. But we're seeing, I think, more of a demand for those connections in the community, and not just the short segments of a bike path. But can we go from the city of Delaware down to 315 in the bike paths down there? Can you do that through working with Metro Parks, working with Preservation Parks? So that's more of a I think an amenity that people are looking for. But that's helpful input in terms of the need for the 50-acre park with all these recreational fields and stuff. It's somewhat negated by what we're seeing down there. The other point I wanted to make regarding, not much more regarding parks, fire EMS fund, our fire impact fees will be funding in part the fourth fire station that will be under construction, hopefully later this year, early next year, probably closer to early next year. With the signs up, it's coming, but these projects are always more complicated than you expect. And that one will be pretty much a replica of what we have on the west side of the city. We are trying to incorporate some renewable energy aspects to that, perhaps solar, we're looking into that. And so, but it's pretty much going to be the same type of fire EMS station we see on the west side of the city. But I know the residents down there are asking about it. They've been very patient, and the timing is good, obviously, because it continues to grow. So that's a good, important project to mention. Utilities, I won't spend a lot of time on that, except to say that the utility funds have their own dedicated revenue stream, capacity dollars that we get from developers when they do projects, and our monthly water, our monthly charges. City Council has been very farsighted in terms of being able to see the need for the increased infrastructure that we need, whether it was the new water plant or the new wastewater plant. We put in place increases in our water rates several years ago to help pay for all that. But unlike roads, there's a dedicated funding stream for it. So our utility system, both above ground and below ground, is in pretty good shape.
We should probably mention that with the sewer, we're just finishing up our draft of a sewer master plan, kind of an update of the sewer master plan that identifies issues with the old system, but more importantly, identifies how the system can be expanded based on the current plant capacity, elevations, and things like that. Why that's significant is it really goes hand in glove with David's getting ready to work on comprehensive planning. And the sewer plan and the comp plan can work together, or they can be really, really different. What drives a sewer plan is how far you can possibly reach with your sewer based on the invert elevation at your wastewater collection point. So based on that, we say, hey, we can go out 4 more miles this way. That doesn't mean we should go out 4 more miles that way. So those are the kind of things, this version of the sewer master plan, we're going to contemplate. How we may adjust those facility planning boundaries based on what's maybe a more logical terminus for that, based on what's happened around the perimeter of the city growth, what we see we may be growing into. So there's some it's important because it directly reflects where the boundary of potential development could be or should be. And
again, I know I briefed you on that process of it's kind of like transportation master plan. You'd be remiss if you didn't account for what is the planning area that we're potentially talking about. But again, it doesn't mean that you put in that arterial sewer pipe or the arterial road to the farthest point out. It may mean that it's just development driven. And other things have to happen, as Bill's talking about. You get pinch points, this and that. I think one of the key things with that sewer master plan that's really emerging is that it's more a dynamic document and provides a model that the engineers can run, so that when we're talking to a developer about sewer availability or what they may have to do to provide sewer availability, we can actually run a model. And instead of just a line on a map, you can run a model now and understand in much more quickly and much more real-time way what would have to occur. The hope is that we keep that model up to date over time. That's a really different and important tool, I think. And I know Bill shares that.
right, it is. And although, because we do have enterprise funds to take care of the existing infrastructure, there are still some critical decisions in terms of where we expand infrastructure. There's not an endless piggy bank there, and all the lines that show up on at least the current plan, which a lot of them are on the same upgraded plan, we couldn't afford. We couldn't afford all of those. The development community couldn't afford all those, and they may all represent, if it was all filled out, 10 times the capacity of our plant, or maybe a community of 180,000 people. Those are things Delaware won't be. So those are the kind of decisions we're going to look at as we go into the finalizing this. The comp plan process is to say what makes sense for Delaware today, and there are some realistic financial restrictions that we should put into place. So we have something that's more realistic to what we think Delaware might look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and maybe even as far as 40 years from now. But having things on a plan that might not be realistic for 75 years, how practical is that really to be spending a whole lot of time and effort at this point?
Again, I know it's good later, but that's one of those precursor documents that feeds into the comp plan process, so we all can understand that kind of information. Some of you will recall, some of you won't, the exercise we went through several years ago with both you and City Council to kind of take the 13 priority growth areas in the current plan. It's kind of difficult to think of 13 high priority areas, but we have them in there, and we took that exercise and all right, you only have six dots. Pick your 6 out of these 13. Some of that is an exercise in just geography and policy and that sort of thing, but some of it is roads, maintenance, sewer lines, sewer plants, water plants, that kind of thing. So as we get into the comprehensive plan process, I think that'll be good information to feed into it. It's just good technical information. We'll have to find a way to digest that in a way that it's not as technical.
Yeah,
Looking at updating the comprehensive
Yeah.
plan, I
The
mean, it
comprehensive-
went through 2008, so we're, you
Yeah,
know.
we're a little,
Correct.
yeah, wait, but it
running-
served us well, as Dave said, it's been a document that has served us well, but it's definitely in need of updating. City Council earlier this year appropriated funding for that update, so really it's in Dave's court now to develop the request for proposals. It's a very extensive process to get the teams in place, but the Planning Commission will play an important role as kind of an extension into the community along with City Council. And we'll hopefully be using some more modern civic engagement techniques as opposed to just having a meeting at the library. We find that you don't always get a representative grouping when you do it that way, so there's other ways of approaching that. But it's a project that will probably take 18 to 24 months, Dave, by 24 months.
Yeah, I think at least that we're gonna have to reach people in all kinds of ways. We gotta reach our citizens where they are. Some of that's on Facebook, some of that is at the library, some of that is face-to-face. Still, as we all know, Delaware is still kind of a face-to-face town as well. So we'll have to do all that.
Real quickly, there's a park index in there, in that CIP. It just talks about how we take a look at what our park needs are, and Dean, there are some benchmarks that we use in there in terms of number of athletic fields we need and things like that. So we use that as a tool when we're planning these things. And I want to just thank everybody for giving us the chance to be before you tonight. Are there any further feedback, Stacy, from your perspective? I think,
You know, in my honest opinion, I think we've got a great community. I think when you look at some of the other communities in the area, I think we're top of the line. It is hard to see that we've got some streets out there that are Fs, but we'll figure it out. That's what we do.
yeah, I appreciate that.
I think we have a great park system, not only in the city, but in the county. I think we've got a lot of things to be very grateful for. But there's always work to do.
Yeah, we got a lot done with what we have. So, well, thank you for giving us the chance to be here tonight.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Anything else on the planning director's report for the evening?
I think it's plenty for one evening.
If you say so,
I can keep going.
you're more than welcome. All right, then we'll move along. Commission member comments and discussion. I guess we'll just start here. Nothing? George?
Not tonight.
The only thing I've got is, and Bill, you might probably take care of it. The top of the sign down there at Castleton and Hop Road, I don't know how it came off. The top. You know, the blue part.
Road sign?
Yeah, I don't know how in the devil, the sign wasn't, I mean, the pole wasn't hit.
We'll get it taken care of.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm happier than a frog in a pond.
Well, all right. George?
Nothing.
Hey, I would just, quick little, the Cheshire roundabout that we talked about being built, it's now 3 months in where Cheshire is still shut down. So do not come that way. They have not completed the roundabout yet. So
We've heard about that from some.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure everybody's saying it's the weather. Well,
Is there an anticipated?
Yeah, they're
Completion
looking at
date?
the end of the month is the hope.
it was October, well, initially, the date would have been well past type of thing. And then the county engineers were talking about October 15th and October 1st, but maybe they're
looking at the end of, they're looking to try to have it open by the end of the month.
Yeah.
The date established by the contractor is October 1st. They are currently working on at least intermediate course asphalt. I haven't been out there. Besides the roundabout, have they gone any further on the resurfacing on Cheshire to the west? Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot of pavement. A lot of that was widened for the roundabout and then doing a turn lane there at Balmoral or Terragowen. Forgive me, I can't remember the first name.
That's okay.
It's one of the two. But they are earnestly working.
Mhm.
I think they had some weather yesterday with the pavement, with the amount of rain we got, but they're working earnestly.
Yeah, it's not fun to try to get around that area on the many miles out of your way back roads.
Oh, yeah.
Very much understood, but it'll be a good asset.
Absolutely. I don't have anything this evening other than to thank you both again for coming in and presenting to us tonight. And as always, thanks to staff for putting together everything. You guys do a great job. Keep it up. Looking forward to the comprehensive plan update in the future, and excited to be a part of that as well through that process. With that said, our next regular meeting is October 4th. Anybody know of any schedule conflicts right now with that? Okay. With that said, our meeting is adjourned at 8:25 p.m.
We'll get down there.